GBP USD short position that I personally took in July of 2021. So if we look at the GBP USD market, the overall structure is going to show us that we are bullish. Now, this is a trade that I'm taking from top to bottom, each individual aspect brought in as we go. So we can see we are bullish. From this point, we had a break of structure here, bullish break of structure, higher high, and then we came in and formed a higher low, reacting to this demand zone. And then we've come up and formed another higher high again, just about breaking this structure. Now, before we get into the actual trade setup I'm about to show you, this in itself is showing you an example of a trade that we could have taken using the methods I've showed you. I actually did take a position here. I closed it early. That was my bad. But obviously, as we can see, we had the bullish break of structure. We come back down. We tap into a demand zone. We fill an imbalance. So obviously, we make the pricing efficient. And then the market made a bullish move up, which we could have obviously brought into the highs. Now, I actually brought it on the wick, but I closed it somewhere in this messy price action because it was beginning to look bearish. So that was a mistake of mine. Obviously, something I journaled as well. Should have just held off on the trade, but it is what it is. It still highlights a great opportunity that you could have taken if you had the resilience to hold out through the bearish price action. So where we are right now on GBP USD is we formed a new higher high. We've come back down and we've hit a low point here, which is a little bit of a demand zone. If we scale it down to the lower timeframes now, moving to the 15-minute time frame, we can work with the structure we have right here. So this was the range that I took my short position from, and I'll show you why I did that. Now, we know that the overall higher time frame trend is, of course, bullish. If we look at the current structure, we had a demand zone retest here. That formed a new demand zone here with a nice impulsive move, which left open an imbalance. Okay, so we have an imbalance in price there, and there's a demand zone at the bottom of that imbalance. Now, bringing in key levels that we learned about in the main course, we can also see that at the top of the demand zone, we have a key level, 1.38500. So there we go. We have this region here with an imbalance leading into it and some generally equal low liquidity going on right here, just above the imbalance, that could therefore take us down and gives us indication that we could be taken down into this zone for a retest before we begin moving to the upside. Okay, so if we also then pair that with what we've seen here, from the higher high, we have had some bearish breaks of structure in the 15-minute structure here. So we can see here, price retested its supply zone, began moving to the downside, and found some footing at an area of general equal lows, above an imbalance, and above a key level and demand zone. So from this point, I have an idea that I do want to sell the market, and I do want to bring the market down into here before I even begin considering looking for buys in line with the overall trend. So at this point, what I would do is scale down to the low timeframes and see what confirmations we have and what structure we have in our favor in this specific market. So bringing price all the way down to the 1-minute time frame now, what I'm going to do when looking for an entry is scale back to the initial retest of the supply zone, see if we have any open imbalances or areas of interest to sell from that haven't been retested yet. Now, if we move back over here on the 1-minute time frame, you can see we have bullish structure of higher highs, higher lows. Okay, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, and then we had a bearish break of structure, which pointed us into a downtrend, forming a lower low and then a lower high. Now, what this downtrend has done is leave an open imbalance. We can see that there is an imbalance here, which leads us into a 1-minute supply zone. So I then go and mark on this 1-minute supply zone and figure, right, we have an imbalance here. I know I want to sell the market. I know I'm looking for a more premium price to sell from because of how the market is currently moving in this tight little range. So I would then look for a retest of the supply zone to then sell. Now, this is a confirmation entry. Okay, this entry is already confirmed. The reason being, if we think back to that break of structure pattern we like to see, let me just quickly show you. Very messy, but like this, we've seen all of this pattern form except for this initial point here. So what we would like to see now is this point form to then bring the market down lower, right? So I would go ahead and place on a sell limit because we do have our confirmations. So let's shift it up to the higher time frames. Make sure that we still have that visible. Go ahead and put a sell limit on this refined 1-minute zone. So 1.39030. Look at potentially a 5 pip stop loss. Even lower, 3 pip stop loss would work. It gives us complete accountability for the high of this move and a little bit of movement for spread as well. And then we could go and target the key level imbalance area that we were looking for into 1.3850. If we then left this market to do its thing, play out, we will see that it did indeed get triggered in, traded into the 1-minute supply zone very, very nicely, and then made a bearish move to the downside, which did pretty quickly go and fill our profit target. So that is the first example trade. Showed all of the processes we use, finding the high time frame structure, and then identifying imbalances within that high time frame structure, then scaling to the lower time frames and finding low time frame breaks of structure, which puts us into a bit of a counter trend back into the imbalance, and then scaling to the lower time frames to find breaks of structure there and see potential counter trend opportunities. Obviously, seeing the break of structure followed by a lower high, which reacted from a supply zone and a bearish move down above an imbalance and above liquidity, gives me an indication that we could definitely look to sell this down through into this area of interest. Okay, so if we do want to buy this market on the high time frames, we know that we don't want to do it until we're at least in this area. So that gives us this whole range to sell through. So this opportunity, I believe myself, I took around 12R on it. So I must have entered with a slightly larger stop. I'm guessing around 5 pips. But in this instance, we could have gone with a 3 pip stop. And this is just a great example, great trade breakdown for you. So that is a potential 12 to 15R trade there. Very, very simple, following the processes we've spoken about so far in the course, by continually refining to the lower and lower and lower time frames to find the most precise entries, the most precise targets, and so on for this trade. So this has been a confirmation trade example. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you found some value.